Hey everyone, how's it going? Thanks so much for tuning in. In today's video, I'll be installing a digital dashboard in the V8 swapped 89 S10. Before we begin, I'd like to extend a huge thanks to O'Reilly Auto Parts for all of their continued support. If you guys are knee-deep in some projects or need to get some maintenance done on your daily driver, check out O'ReillyAuto.com and take advantage of the exclusive discount code SOBKyle20, which gets you 20% off of purchases of $100 or more. I put a link in the description box below. Just in case you missed the last episode, I put a link in the description box below. I got the steering system rebuilt, added some performance goodies in there. I swapped in a GMC Typhoon steering wheel and just worked on a whole bunch of stuff related to final assembly. Everything is coming together fantastic. It all looks really, really good. I cannot wait to hear this thing fire up. I also wanted to say thanks right quick to those of you who provided feedback on my little issue in the last video. When I got the Typhoon steering wheel on, I noticed there was a gap between the back of the steering wheel and the column. Turns out the lock plate setup was not installed properly, so you learn something new every day, I suppose. But when I was taking everything apart, all of this and the C-clip that retains everything in place basically just fell out, like it wasn't in at all. And I know, I replaced the cruise control stalk with this one because I'm not running cruise, but the previous owner had replaced the cruise control stalk, so obviously some work had been done in here, and there's this spring that has to be compressed. All of this goes in, and then the C-clip holds it in place. So I have to work on getting all of this set back properly, which should take care of the gap. So again, big thanks. One of my favorite modifications with the 93 Jimmy project was wiring up a factory digital instrument cluster. It was not the easiest thing in the world to try to tackle, but I think the results were very well worth it. That's where I got the idea for this video, but for this truck, I'm going for a more modern alternative. I'm actually going to be installing a complete Dakota Digital replacement instrument cluster. And when you see it power up for the first time, you'll notice that it does have some old school touches, but there's also a lot of really cool features packed in. There's a ton of provisions for various sensors. It's also expandable to hook up, additional sensors and whatnot. It also can take performance readings like 0 to 60 and quarter mile, just a lot of really cool stuff, and it's actually really straightforward to install, so this should be a lot easier than that Jimmy cluster was. I've already gotten a little bit of work out of the way when I was putting the engine together. The nice thing about the Dakota setup is that it comes with brand new sensors that are designed to work with the gauge. So I've got the oil pressure sending unit right there. I've got the coolant temperature sensor right there. And the wires are going to be run this way. And just temporarily I have them hanging right here because they still need to be fed through to the cab. I already have the dashboard taken apart to a degree just because of other work I've been doing simultaneously, like replacing the heater core. But the next step is removing the analog cluster, so let's go ahead and get those switch panels off. The switch panels are held in by 2 Phillips head screws. Now with the switch panels out of the way, I have easy access to the 4 retaining nuts for the surrounding bezel. The last things to take off are 4 more nuts that hold the cluster to the dashboard, and of course the wire harness behind it. If you look in the bottom left of this opening, you'll see the 18-pin connector that corresponds to the analog cluster. Now, if this truck came with the digital cluster from the factory, there'd be a 34-pin connector mounted in that center hole. If you'd like to see everything that it took to wire up the factory digital cluster in the Jimmy, I put a link in the description box below. Now for the Dakota Digital setup, I actually have a specific control box that I need to use. So I once again need to identify what wires go where on the 18-pin connector, so I can then wire them up in this box. Then the instrument cluster will plug in on the side. So the Dakota Digital gauge set actually mounts within the original housing, but I haven't found any specific instructions on how to do that. So I reckon I'm gonna go ahead and take apart the original cluster and see what it looks like on the inside. But that's the digital cluster set and the ribbon cable that attaches to the control box. There's also a choice of either a blue or teal lens. This is really cool. Fits like a glove. The ribbon cable will actually pass through the back of the original housing. There's a hole, but I need to take off the circuit tape from the back. I need to pull all the light bulbs and all the extra connectors because we don't need any of that. Everything will literally pass through this unit. Here's the back of the original cluster. We've got the speedometer here, which in '89, the S10 went from a mechanical cable to read speed to an electronic readout, so there's that. We've got the oil pressure gauge, fuel level, voltometer, and temperature, as well as all of the warning light lenses. So basically, I need to take all of this off. This is the circuitry, where the gauges plug in there. We've got various light bulbs and other connectors. This is where the 18-pin connector for the whole cluster connected to, so getting rid of all of it. So after lots of cutting and test fitting, I think I finally got these bezels where they need to be. On the left, the outside portion, as you can see, there's a giant hole cut in the middle, but this lens system that comes with this cluster kit actually is it's secured down with RTV, so I needed to leave just enough of a lip all the way around so I can put a bead of RTV down and drop the lens in place. Then it has to cure before everything can be put back together. And I painted it black just, in hopes of making the instruments stand out even more. With the inside bezel, there were a few tabs here and there, like that little rectangle section, tab there, that needed to be cut down because the digital cluster wouldn't sit down, all the way. So little adjustments here and there, figuring things out, but it's looking good. Alright, I've got a little bit of weight on the lens. Of course, I left the protective plastic on there so nothing gets scratched. This way everything's going to stay nice and secure so the silicone can properly cure overnight. But now I'm going to go ahead and mount up the digital portion. Like you've seen, the circuit board is attached to this black piece of plastic that is contoured to all of the shapes and angles of that inside bezel. There's holes in that piece of plastic as well, and I'm going to use those to bolt it to the bezel. I actually ended up cutting the inside bezel even more because with how I wanted to bolt it in, I needed to make sure there was plenty of clearance to be able to get a wrench in there. It's not very likely that the digital clusters have to come back out completely, but you never know, and I wanted to make sure it was at least still somewhat serviceable. So at this point, it's all bolted in nice and secure. All of the silicone is dried. Now I'm gonna fit a little bit of weather stripping around some of the outside edges just to make sure there's no rattles. And then I think we can go ahead and put this back in the truck. This is gonna look so cool. Since there's not a lot of room down there to work, let alone film, I went ahead and cut off the 18 pin connector and labeled all of my wires, so now I'm gonna show you how I went about doing it. I always try to track down the factory original service manuals if I can, because they're an invaluable resource, especially for someone like me that's learning. I feel like they go into way more detail than the books that you would typically find out there that aren't specific to a model year. They're more general and they cover more broad spectrum stuff, I guess. So I've really gotten accustomed to using these, and they're just awesome. I got really lucky to find an electrical book, which is phenomenal because you can see how power runs through the truck, every single aspect of the truck. So I just already had my finger on the instrument panel portion, so you can see the 18 pin connector and where all the wires go to for the different lamps, the different functions, you know, power, ground. So it's really easy to see, you know what color wire does what, so you're not guessing and messing things up. So what I ended up doing was snipping the wires one by one because the connector is labeled 1 through 18. So snip the wire one by one and labeled the wire, got it out of the way. So now I just have to figure out where in the world I'm going to mount that control box. There's not a lot of really good places to put this control box. At some point, I'm going to swap in a 2nd gen Blazer center console. I've got the top section of it taken off for the moment, but I thought about putting this in this opening and having the console sit on top of it, but unfortunately, the ribbon cable just isn't long enough to route that way, so I'm probably just going to put it up underneath the left-hand side of the dash somewhere, but we'll see. I went ahead and connected the ribbon cable as well as a power and ground so we can turn on the cluster for the first time. That is too cool. I really like the teal. It reminds me of the factory digital cluster in the Jimmy. I don't have any sensors connected to it whatsoever, so now it's a matter of lengthening some wires, making some new connectors, some soldering fun, all of that good stuff. But man, that is really sweet. Fast forward a while and I've got everything hooked up. It looks like a mess at the moment, kinda is, but I still need to tuck all the wires and get everything nice and clean before it goes back into the dash, but now we can check out the different functions, make sure all the connections are good. But first, let me show you how everything got hooked up. Like I was saying earlier, wiring this up is actually a really straightforward process. Once you figure out what wires do what in the 18 pin connector, it's just a matter of hooking them all to the control box, which is labeled. You hook up the new sensors or the wires for the Dakota Digital sensors and you're pretty much ready to go. I took a little bit more time with this truck and basically lengthened every wire that I was going to end up using. I soldered them, heat shrink, all of that good stuff, so everything's got a really nice connection. I've also got everything labeled, so there is no guesswork at all. I've also got a couple bulbs wired in temporarily. I'm not sure where I'm going to route this stuff yet, but one's for the seatbelt warning indicator and the other one is for the alternator. Here's how the wires are routed. The coolant temperature sensor comes over this way and ties into the harness for the alternator. The oil pressure sensor also ties into the same harness. It's then joined up to the main engine bay harness, which we put underneath the brake booster instead of over the top like it was originally, just for a cleaner look. The speed sensor comes up across the frame and the brake lines and up this way, and I put it through a grommet in the firewall back in there, but I just realized that was the hole for the hood release cable, so I'm gonna have to refish these through that hole right there, which was used for cruise control, which again, I no longer have. This is going to be a little hard to do with one hand, but we'll give it a try. One of the things that you wire up into the control box is this little 2-position switch. It allows you to put the display into demo mode, as well as go between all the personalizable settings and some other menus and whatnot. So if we hold down the 2 position and turn the power on, now we're in demo mode. You don't have to hold it anymore, and to take it out of demo mode, you just cycle the power again. But you can see the tach and speed readouts and what the gauges look like. I mean, you can't deny that is just really, really cool. This is what I was talking about, like old school flavor, modern touches. This totally fits the whole Restomod idea of this truck. Fantastic. If we hold down the 1 position, do the same thing. And this is the setup menu, and you can just click that 1 position. Set speed, tach, volt, water, oil, fuel, the performance gauge section, the night dimming when you turn the headlights on. All sorts of stuff. This is what the cluster looks like at this particular moment. So speed still needs to be set. Got to do that out on the road. Fuel percentage, voltometer, water temperature, which there's no water at the moment, or coolant. It's just ambient. And then, of course, no oil pressure because we're not running. But I love it. I love it so much. I just can't believe how far this truck has come. It looks so good, and I'm very, very thankful to those of you who've been keeping up with the series and, all of the nice comments, feedback, and suggestions. It truly means a lot. There's a little bit of wiring I gotta finish up. There's some other things that need to be hooked up as well. I gotta get the core support positioned and just do all my final checks and balances, but if everything goes well, we'll hear this thing fire up in the next episode. Well, everyone, that is going to wrap it up for this video. I hope y'all enjoyed. Please don't forget to leave a like below. It really helps the video a lot. And if you haven't subscribed already, consider doing so, because there's always a lot more where that came from, and you do not want to miss the first startup and initial break-in of this engine. It's going to be so much fun. So make sure those notification bells are turned on as well. Of course, a massive thanks once again to O'Reilly Auto Parts for all of their continued support. Don't forget to check out O'ReillyAuto.com and take advantage of the exclusive discount code SAABKyle20. I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.